Good evening and welcome. I am Paul Alpert, the chair of the Needham Planning Board. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Planning Board. It is January 18th, 2022 at about 7:19 p.m. This open meeting of the Needham Planning Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with current state regulations, and is being recorded. Public access to this meeting does not ensure that there will be public participation unless required by law. This meeting will not have public comment except in connection with any hearing that is on the agenda. We have two hearings on the agenda this evening. We have a hearing scheduled for 7:20 p.m. with regard to an amendment to the site plan special permit for the Chestnut Street parking lot. And then at 7:30, we have a public hearing with regard to the application for an amendment to a site plan special permit for Hearth Pizzeria with regard to outdoor seating. First, we'll confirm that we have a quorum of the members of the planning board present. When I call your name, please respond that you are present. Marty Jacobs.
Here, present.
Adam Block.
Present.
Jean McKnight.
Present.
Natasha Espada.
Present.
We have everyone here. And next, our town employees. We have Lee Newman, our Director of Planning and Community Development.
Present.
And Alex Klee, our assistant town planner.
Present.
Thank you. As each agenda item is reached, I will introduce participants who are here to present or discuss projects and proposals. Or if I'm not sharing, because we do have something where I will be recusing myself, Adam Block, who will be chairing that meeting, will introduce the participants. For those participating in the meeting, please also be aware that others may be able to see you and hear you. Anything that you share or state will be a matter of public record. All supporting materials for this meeting, including the agenda, are available on the town's website, www.needhamma.gov, unless otherwise noted. The ground rules for this meeting are designed to allow for an accurate public record. Each of the speakers on our agenda will be introduced. After speakers conclude their remarks, each board member will be asked by name for any comment, questions, or motions. All votes will be by roll call. For each participant, please remember to state your name for the record before speaking. And for each person from the public who is recognized to speak, please remember to state your name and address for the record before speaking. That concludes our introductory remarks. It is after 7:20, so let's dive right into the first public hearing. This is an application for an amendment to a major project site plan special permit, number 98-6. The town of Needham is the petitioner with regard to the property located at the existing municipal parking lot on Chestnut Street and Lincoln Streets, Needham, Massachusetts. And presenting tonight, I believe, is just Town Council Chris Heath. Chris, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and hello, board members. Good to see everyone. So I'm here tonight to talk, I think, relatively briefly about this requested amendment. And the requested amendment is to the site plan special permit for the Chestnut and Lincoln Street parking lot, which the planning board first approved in 1998. And that site plan special permit has undergone several revisions in the years since then. This requested amendment concerns seasonal outdoor seating by restaurants that neighbor the parking lot. And I understand that you either have or will soon have, I think, applications for seasonal outdoor seating from the restaurants themselves. And I think, in fact, you have one before you later on this evening. So the reason for this application is that the town's site plan special permit covers the entire parking lot, and it does not contemplate or allow seasonal outdoor seating by the restaurants that neighbor it. So to the extent that these restaurants are going to come in and seek your permission to engage in seasonal outdoor seating, we thought it would be necessary to amend the permit to specifically allow room for or authorization for restaurants to conduct seasonal outdoor seating on a portion of the parking lot. Now, I think there's at least, two important points to make about that. As things currently stand, I don't believe we're anticipating or contemplating any actual loss of parking spaces. I believe the area that will be used, I think will be used for seasonal outdoor seating is not occupied by any actual in-use parking spaces presently. For example, I think Hearth is applying for seasonal outdoor seating in an area that has been used as such for the past year or two during COVID. And two, the second important point, I think, is that we're not actually applying for any actual seasonal outdoor seating. We're just looking for room in our permit, which covers the whole lot, for others to come in and seek that permission. And I think it's really the responsibility of the restaurants themselves, if they're going to seek permission to do this, to file their applications, which I assume the planning board will review as they come in and decide on their own merits. So we're just looking for, again, some room within the existing permit that covers the entire lot for restaurants to come in and seek this permission from the board on a individual restaurant by restaurant basis. And I think that is all of my comments on the request, but I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that the board members may have.
Okay. Before we get to questions, Marty, just please give me a minute. We do have some communications. First, we have a communication from Dennis Condon, our fire chief. The fire department is okay with allowing the seasonal usage, provided that the safety elements equal to or superior than those used on a temporary basis due to COVID are continued to be utilized. Then we have an email from Tara Gurge, who is the Assistant Public Health Director for the town of Needham, and she writes, the Public Health Division conducted the review for a proposed amendment to the existing special permit for the municipal parking lot on Chestnut Street lot, Ray Outdoor Dining, and we have no comments to share at this time. And lastly, with regard to this, we have a letter from Thomas Ryder, our acting town engineer, who writes that the engineering department has no comment or objection to the proposed amendment. I would just like to make clear for the record my understanding of what we're doing here with this application. It's my understanding right now that Hearth Pizzeria is, as was expressed by Mr. Heap, using a space that they're currently using for outdoor seating. Pre-COVID, those were parking spaces. However, they are not actually on the town lot property. They're on the private property of whoever owns that space, Hearth Pizza's landlord. And I believe the town has an easement with regard to the parking spaces. And Masala Arts, so similarly, is occupying space that pre-COVID were parking spaces purely for Masala Art because it was privately held space. I also believe that since this is a municipal parking lot, The planning board would have jurisdiction for Masala Art, excuse me for my Boston accent, and Hearth Pizzeria. But for the municipal lot itself, if there were other restaurants that were to move into other buildings that abutted the parking lot, I believe it would be the select board that would have jurisdiction to grant permission to use that area. So it does cover the entire lot. It is possible that in the future, restaurants would go into space that is currently not occupied by restaurants, and so they might be seeking outdoor seating in the parking lot, but there's none right now. Those are my comments. I don't have any questions. Marty, did you have something you'd like to say or some questions?
Yeah, I'm, given what Attorney Heap has said, do I understand, Chris, that you would, on behalf of the town, would not have an objection should we insert into a decision that there be no new loss of parking spaces?
No, I don't think I would have a problem with that at all.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask for a clarification on that? Isn't the outdoor seating going to be located on top of parking spaces? So won't they be lost to the extent that the outdoor seating is on top of those spaces?
That's, so I guess, thank you for that. Thank you for that comment, Lee. Marty, I guess one question that I would have is, the area currently being used by Hearth hasn't, as I understand it, hasn't been used as parking for this during COVID. But I think there were some spaces shown on the plan that existed prior to restaurants first beginning to look for space to do outdoor dining. So I guess amending my first response to your question. I guess we want to maybe build in a little bit of flexibility here to the extent that restaurants may want to use some existing spaces. But the other thing I'd add is that each individual restaurant is going to need to apply to the board for whatever outdoor seating it's going to engage in. So you're going to have the opportunity to look at that on a restaurant by restaurant basis as they apply for this relief.
Lee, could I have clarification on that? If, let's say a restaurant were to move in where say where the Middlesex Bank is now, and they wanted to have outdoor seating in the spaces that abutted that property, would we have any say in that, or would that be totally in front of the select board?
The way it works is if it's on private property, if the parking spaces, that municipal lot captures parking spaces that are located on private property as well as public property. So to the extent that the outdoor seating is proposed on private property, where there's an easement for the parking spaces, it would be the planning board's jurisdiction. To the extent that the outdoor seating was on public land, then it would be the select board.
So the way I understand most of the parking lot, if there were new restaurants going in, Marty, where Masala Art is and where Heath is, they're using private property. But for example, Middlesex Savings Bank or that entire area, that those buildings that are fronted on Chestnut Street, if a restaurant went in there, I don't believe they'd be in front of us. I think if they wanted to use parking spaces for outdoor seating, they would have to apply to the select board. Select board would have to have a public hearing on the application. So the other merchants whose customers use the parking lot would have an opportunity to ask the select board to not allow it because they'd be taking away spaces. But I don't see how we could have a special permit that says you can't take away any existing spaces where That's basically what's there. There's nothing but parking spaces.
Marty, I think the goal of this really was to, right now, the site plan that was issued for this municipal parking lot does not allow outdoor dining on any of the parking spaces. So I think the idea was to amend that permit so that the planning board or the select board, depending upon who has jurisdiction, could entertain applications to put outdoor dining on parking through the process that that board would follow, and that this underlying permit would not get in the way of that.
Sorry.
Adam, did you want to say something?
So I think for clarity, in the event that if a restaurant, as you say, went into what's now Middlesex Bank, and for clarity, we don't see that happening right away at all, or Chromosomic TV and those other businesses, they may have an easement for parking that relate to the private use. So those private parking spaces would be, if someone applied for a special permit for outdoor seating on those private spaces in that public lot, then they would have to come before us, but otherwise it is to the select board.
Other than the area where Hearth Pizza is and where Masala Art is, are there any spaces that's on private property?
Farmhouse also has.
Yeah, that's in the same area as Hearth Pizza.
That's right.
I think it's just basically Simon's property, which is basically CVS, Hearth, and Farmhouse and Masala that are sitting on easements.
Yeah.
I have a plan. If it's helpful to show that on a plan, I can put that up, Mr. Chairman.
No, that's okay. I think we have an idea.
Okay.
Yes, Jean, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I want to make sure I understand this fully. It seems to me that what the select board is applying for pertains to that entire very large parking area behind CVS that is accessed off Chestnut Street and off that other street parallel. Parallel to Chestnut Street over by the Unitarian Church. And what it allows, what it does is it amends the original special permit that was granted for the big parking lot so that the select board, for any restaurants abutting the parking lot, may, on the parking lot, whether the town owns it in fee or whether the town holds an easement, as we're told is the case in some areas. Excuse the home phone ringing. Yeah, Steve picked it up. We're just amending our special permit so that the select board now can allow this parking wherever the select board wants to do that. However, for the existing restaurants that have special permits, each one of them have to come to us to get an amendment of their special permit, as Hearth is doing. In the future, if a new restaurant goes in, we'll be granting a special permit. It will be our decision what conditions we want to attach to that special permit with regard to parking and outdoor seating. If I got that right, am I explaining that correctly?
I think so. I would just offer, I think, one clarification, which is that the existing permit covers the entire lot. So we're here to amend that permit because that's what we're working with. We're working with, as a starting point, the permit that the board approved in 1998, covering the entire thing. But there's no intention, I don't believe, to allow for seasonal outdoor dining really in any other part of the parking lot other than what immediately abuts the three existing restaurants on Great Plain Ave. Currently at least, there's no desire to work with any other part of the parking lot. So we're not. So as a matter of permitting, we're in front of the board with a permit that covers the entire lot. As a matter of actual parking spaces and actual seating, we're talking about the area that Hearth is currently occupying, and maybe a very small area abutting Masala Art.
Yeah, Gene, I think you make a good point that if a new restaurant were to go into one of the spaces that abuts the parking lot, they would have to get a special permit from us. And at that special permit hearing, we do have an opportunity to put our 2 cents worth in about the outdoor seating.
Yes, if I could add to that clarification, but there would not need to be any further amendment to the town's special permit for this parking lot, because we're
Correct.
taking care of that right now for the entire parking lot.
Yeah.
I just want to add one caveat to what Jean said, and that is if we issued a permit for another restaurant, let's say where the bank is located, and 2 years later they decide they want to put outdoor dining there, it would not come back to us. It would go to the select board. If it's on the municipal lot and it meets the standards for that abbreviated process under section 6.9 of the bylaw.
Right. But in the initial application,
But the initial application.
we would have the opportunity to comment on it, to question them about what their plans are for outdoor seating, and to see whatever plans with the parking lot that they may have in mind at that time.
That's correct.
So
Gene.
when Lee speaks of section 6.9, you're speaking of amendments to our zoning bylaw that we enacted at the recent town meeting to make it easier to put in outdoor seating. Is that correct?
That's correct. We modified that, and that base rule basically allowed people, provided they met certain parameters, to be able to put in outdoor seating through a fast track process. So if they meet the fast track process in terms of what they're proposing, then it would just be the select board and they would not need any relief from you. On private property, on public property.
On public property. Okay, thanks for reminding me of that. I now remember that concept. Okay, good.
Any further comments or questions from the planning board? This
No,
is a
but
public. Yes,
I would only say, I think we're going to have to be very careful when we read the draft decision that Lee puts together, because we're splitting some hairs here. It's going to be hard for her to describe. So I'm just cautioning everybody that we got to be real careful when we draft this decision.
okay. This is a public hearing, and so the public is invited to comment or to raise questions. I am not seeing any raised hands. Alex, are you seeing any raised hands from the attendees?
I don't.
I will give them a few seconds to use the raise hand button on their computers. If anybody from the attendees wishes to make a comment. We do have a lot of people here tonight, but I'm not seeing anybody. Yes, Jean?
We did, there was in our packets an email, and will you be mentioning that as a comment? The email from Amy Helson, town staff, with a communication from Sigaloff Jewelers. Is that considered?
You
Right.
want to read that, or do you want me to read it?
Yeah, no, I'm not asking that I read it, but I just wondered if it was something that was going to be read as part of the record.
I'd forgotten about it. I know I printed it.
Well, I have it here if you want me to read it.
Let me see if I can find it quickly. Here we go. I got it. Yeah, so So this was an email from Bernie Segaloff of Segaloff Jewelers to Amy Halson, of the town, which Amy has forwarded to us. This was the only comment that we did receive, so I'll go ahead and read it. It's fairly short. Bernie writes, I just had a conversation with a lawyer friend who read the legal notice. Bernie had previously seen it, I guess. And he got the same impression that I did, that parking spaces may be taken. We've discussed. The wording is very vague. Could I ask you to reach out to the planning board on my behalf and forward them my concerns about losing parking space to them prior to the next meeting, which I believe is Tuesday? I would greatly appreciate this. I'm fine with their knowing that it comes from me. I just want my concerns to be known. I think that's, he had prior communication with Amy Halson when he first read the legal notice. He writes, with regard to the Chestnut and Lincoln Street parking lots, it is separate from the Hearth restaurant request. I just want to make sure that we're not going to lose any more parking spots in the lots. Could you please check this with the planning board or the select board to make sure for me? And he writes, we can't afford to give up any more parking. It would result in the end of business. So I guess we made it clear that at the present time, all we have are the use of space from Hearth Pizza and Masala Art. And what was that other restaurant that you mentioned?
Farmhouse.
Farmhouse. Which would not be taking any more spaces at this time. There's no application to take more spaces at this time. But this amendment to the special permit would allow for future applications, which would have to be approved either by the planning board or the select board, depending upon who had jurisdiction over the spaces in question. Okay. So with that, let's see if we had any more. Nope, no hands raised. So I will entertain a motion to close the hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on closing the hearing? Hearing none, we'll take the vote. There's a motion to close the hearing. Marty Jacobs,
Aye.
Adam Block,
Aye.
Natasha Espada,
Aye.
Ian McKnight.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. It's unanimous. The hearing is closed. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you.
You as well.
Hey,
Will we wait to have a decision before us in order to make a decision? Is that the plan?
Yeah.
Yes, I'll draft the decision and you can vote it at your next meeting. I'm assuming that you wish me to draft something in the affirmative.
Thank you.
You know, I would like to emphasize that Chris's point that he made after some questions, that the town has no intent to expand the number of parking spaces that it gives up at this time. I would like it to be clear in the decision that that's the town's position right now.
Okay.
yeah,
Thank you.
that's fine. Okay, so the next matter on the agenda is another public hearing. This is a public hearing on an amendment to major project site plan special permit number 2006-04, Soul Family Foods LLC. That's a tongue twister. Doing business as Hearth Pizzeria. The petitioner for the property located at 974 Great Plain Avenue, Needham, Massachusetts. And it looks like the sole panelist who will be presenting tonight is Ivan Milan Colecchio. Did I pronounce that correctly? Great. Who is the chef and co-owner of Hearth Pizzeria. Mr. Colecchio, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Again, my name is Ivan Milan Palacio, chef and owner of Hearth Pizzeria. First, I would like to thank you all for allowing us to operate in the patio during the past year and a little bit more. It's been crucial to our business, thus making us be here tonight, asking you for an approval to allow us to keep our patio. As you can see here, we actually don't sit on any parking spots on the left side because there was never any parking spots. I believe that we may be in front of one parking spot towards the right side where the farmhouse is. The setup currently has 33 seats outside or so, give or take, moving here and there. We have made an enclosing of wood, which contains trees that are all around. We have a service station, a hand washing station, and then as soon as you walk in through the back door, there are 3 bathrooms towards the left of the restaurant. There is plenty of space to accommodate wheelchairs. We have been operating in this manner, but we just would like to legalize the seating.
Okay, thank you very much. Once again, we do have some communication from the town, the appropriate town agencies and boards, so let me read those into the record. We have an email from Dennis Condon, our fire chief. The fire department is okay with allowing this year-round usage, provided that the safety elements equal to or superior than those used on a temporary basis due to COVID are continued to be utilized. And we have an email from John Schlittler, the police chief. He writes, the police is okay with this application if the safety measures remain as previously approved. And we got some clarification because Alex Klee, our assistant planning director, asked Chief Schlittler, when you mention safety measures, are you referring to Jersey barriers to separate diners and vehicles? And he wrote, yes, it looks like they are in place. And as long as they continue to use that setup and not alter it, it will be fine. And not lastly, we have an email from Tara Gurge, the Assistant Public Health Director. The Public Health Division conducted the review for a proposed amendment to the existing special permit for Hearth Pizzeria at 974 Great Plain Avenue regarding outdoor dining. And we have no comments to share at this time. And lastly, we have a letter from Thomas Ryder, our acting town engineer, who writes, for the engineering department, we have no general direction to the proposed plans. However, as the seating will be located within the town's municipal parking easement, select board approval will need to be sought as well. And I have no comments or questions. Are there any comments or questions from the other members of the planning board? Adam. Oh, I'm sorry, Marty, go ahead.
Oh, that's all right. Let Adam go first.
Okay, yes, Adam.
I certainly understand, the need to do it. I'm glad that it had been working for you before, and we're glad to be able to, to continue. Just as a matter of clarity, Lee, I don't have the revised bylaw in front of me for outdoor seating. Was there a certain percentage of the number of seats inside that would be allowed outside?
Under the abbreviated process, you're right, it's 30%. But in this case, they're actually amending their special permit because the parking spaces are located on a private lot. The parking space, the outdoor dining is located on basically a parking lot, which requires the amendment to the base permit. They are beyond the 30% here because I think their permits for 100 seats and they're showing 38 outside or 33. And then I think also they're talking about doing it year round as opposed to just doing it within the seasonal limit. So they're asking for three basically conditions that go beyond the expedited process. So yes, that's covered under their application.
I'm pleased to support this application. Thank you very much.
Marty?
Yeah, my question is, there was a reference to the town's existing easement. Can somebody explain to me just what that easement is and how I can find it and look at it and read it?
And if I may add, who owns the fee?
The fee is owned by the Simons. At the time, or the property owner, I think it's the Simon family owns the building, which includes CVS, includes Hearth and Farmhouse. At the time the municipal parking lot was created, it was basically done as a partnership between some of the private property owners who had land there and the town that created the municipal lot. And so even though the lot looks like a singular entity, there are property lines that are running through it. So as it relates to the Simon property, I think there were six or eight parking spaces on that property. And the town had I think the Simons just basically retained rights to access their property, for maintenance of the building and to access their property for purposes of maintaining the outdoor dumpster behind their property. And the town basically had rights for those parking spaces in the back. And I can get you a copy of the easement documents, Marty. We have.
I'd like to see it and read it because it sounds backwards to call it the town's easement. It sounds like it's Simon's easement. But let me reserve judgment until I see the document and read it.
So,
Yes, Jean.
follow up to what Marty said, if I may, Jean. By calling it the town's easement, I understood that the town is the holder of the easement and that another party owns the fee.
That's correct.
Yeah. Oh,
Simon owns the property and he only reserved for himself on that property the rights to come onto it to upgrade and maintain his building and to access his dumpster in the back.
From the town's land.
From the town's land.
The town's easement.
He has an easement over the town's land. And so
No,
what is the town's easement?
the town has an easement to put parking spaces on that land, to allow for parking on the land that's owned by Simon. And within that grant of easement, according to Lee, and we'll have to read it, Simon reserved the right to go over those parking spaces or to use areas of the parking spaces to have a dumpster, which I believe has been moved since then. Am I correct on that, Mr. Palacio? That the dumpster has been moved? I remember there used to be a dumpster there.
And there still is. There's actually, so there was only 5 spaces back there. I believe that one of the spaces was used to provide dumpsters for both 974 Great Plain Avenue, whichever the tenant is, which is Hearth Pizzeria right now, or the restaurant next to us, which is the Farmhouse. The town have moved the parking lot, the dumpsters to the middle of the parking lot where those reside currently. However, the enclosure for that dumpster still exists. And nobody uses that. It's just like a closed space that Simon did not want to give out, because if in the future there was a tenant that would move in, they had the autonomy to move the dumpster back into that area, thus leaving again 5 spaces. The 2 dumpsters that are still there are the 2 big green CVS dumpsters, which reside on the left side of or behind where the patio is being proposed. There is a sign there that that space should only be used technically for Hearth, Farmhouse, and CVS customers. as there's like a sign in that piece of the parking lot because there's only 5 spaces. That's what I said at the beginning. I'm only taking like 1 space out of those 5, just on how back I am. And then the other restaurant's taking the remaining of those. But there is still 2 dumpsters there and an enclosure for a dumpster.
So I think what that means, I'm still unclear. I think what that means is that the reference to the town's easement means that the town had the right to access that area behind Hearth and for parking, for, I don't know, 4 spaces, 5 spaces, 6 spaces, I'm not clear. And that the town has surrendered that right in favor of allowing Hearth to use this as a patio? Is that what has happened? And is that what Hearth is asking to see continued? I'm just looking to understand what's going on. I mean, I don't really have any problem with the patio idea. I think it works probably pretty well for you, and I think it's good. I'm just trying to understand the legality of it. What has the town done to allow the easement for parking spaces on private property to be traded for the patio? What documentation is there for that?
I'll pull out and get you the easement documents. You know, it's possible, Marty, now that we're having this conversation, that I have misinterpreted them in the sense that the five, that whether or not the town actually has rights in those 5 parking spaces, or whether or not the easement document that I reviewed was just Simon getting the rights to cross the town's property for the purpose of his dumpster. I will make those documents available to you.
Okay, thank you. I need to review it and understand it, that's all. Okay.
But the initial use of the patio during COVID, I don't recall your being in front of us for that. You must have gotten permission from the select board
Yes,
to use the parking spaces for your outdoor seating during COVID.
that's correct. That's how it was done.
Yep. So the select board probably still has jurisdiction. I think we probably have joint jurisdiction over the outdoor seating, where it's both private property and the town's use of the land for parking spaces.
Which is why I think Tom called out in his letter that there needs to be some acknowledgement of the easement and the selectmen's approval because of the placement of the outdoor seating on the easement.
Yeah, but I'm probably getting too picky here, but if what the town had was a right of way to use the private area for parking, that's all it had. It didn't have the right to grant or not grant the right to use that area for patio space. All they had the right to do was exercise their right to use the parking space easement or give it up for the time being.
Okay,
Not clear
Marty,
what happened.
Marty, you're back to where you were at the beginning, which is my 3rd rule of practicing law.
Which is,
If there's a writing, read the writing.
there you go. Let's start. For sure. Yeah.
So that's where we have to be. Let's get copies of the agreement between Simon and the town,
So
and we'll see what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
Yes, Jean.
I agree, certainly, that we have to see this easement because we have to know how to write up the decision. And it seems to me, if the town holds an easement for parking, therefore, they will be putting this seating area on an area where the town has an easement for parking. And I think it was said in this material attached to the application for site plan review that they will be using at least one of the parking spaces that had been painted on the parking lot. And that one space will be occupied by their Jersey barriers. But if the fee owner is the owner of the property that the restaurant is the lessee of, then of course the fee owner can let them use the property for outdoor dining. It's between the applicant and the fee owner,
Right.
no?
Well, unless there's something in the particular restaurant's permit with us that says can't use anything, can't have any outdoor dining.
Exactly, and that's what we're being asked to amend here.
So-
I do find this application to be not very good at explaining the background. All we have is a one-page application for site plan review, and attached to it are applications for outdoor seating under 6.9 of the zoning bylaw. And those applications, and I think it seems like there's duplicates of two applications attached for the same thing, but anyway.
I
And
think there's 2 copies of the same application, Jean.
Yeah, that's what's here, so, but also, we keep being told that the property owner is the name that Solomon, but
Right.
this application for site plan review is signed by Copley Investments as owner's name.
That is the Simon family. They're doing it. The name of their company is Copley Investments, and
Oh,
sorry,
okay.
it's owned by the Simon family.
Okay,
Just to move this forward, do we have to keep this hearing open to be able to receive those documents, Lee, that you've discussed, correct? So we can't make a motion to close the hearing at this time.
Well, you can make a motion to close the hearing and to allow for those documents to come into the record.
So moved.
Second.
Well, okay, I'm going to have further discussion. Marty, are you okay with that, or do you think that we might have further discussion once we've read the easements?
We might have further discussion, and looking at these 1 or 2 documents that he's going to give us might lead to the need to see more.
Yeah, I don't.
Therefore, I withdraw my motion to close
Yeah.
the hearing.
So if it would have gone this way and it needs to be more discussion, we'd have to reopen it again? Is that, Marty, what you're saying?
If we were to close this now, we'd have to reopen, yes.
Okay.
Instead, I
So
think
we
we're
can-
going to continue it until the next meeting.
I move to continue the hearing.
I second that,
To
what
February
day?
4th?
Lee, in time.
February, I didn't have this on to be continued. It's February 4th, I guess, is the next meeting.
No, February 1st.
February 1st, okay. And Alex, is a good time, 7:30?
Yeah, I would say you can do this first, but Ivan is raising his hand, so I just want to make sure that that works for him. If there's any.
No, that works. I just wanted to address one last thing, if I may.
Sure, go right ahead, please do.
We talk about the parking spaces, and I guess that we have to do a different drawing just to show what I'm intended to do. But we're behind the dumpsters of CVS, so nobody parks there.
No, I
It's
think-
an empty space that is not being used, that I fixed so that we could have the outdoor seating.
But it provides the access to those spaces, doesn't it?
Not really, because we are on the left portion, and like if this is the building where it ends, these are the dumpsters. This is my patio. This is where the parking spots enter. So we are not on any getting in or out. Actually, the farmhouses and all the parking spaces. So we never took any parking spaces, nor you can't drive in. If, let's say, the farmhouse didn't have a patio, you could still park all your cars there. But obviously you can't, because the farmhouse has also the outdoor patio. So Hearth is technically not taking any parking spots.
That's
I
interesting.
actually, from the packet, I have a diagram of it, if I can share really quickly.
Sure.
It's from the packet from the next one. It's basically, the hearth is on this side and this is farmhouse. So the farmhouse is on it, but you still have to, in order to get in, you would have to access
Right.
this piece. But the question that I have also is, farmhouse as well will probably eventually, if they come for this, it would just be good to know where the easement is. Is the easement here? Is the,
I think the easement is at the entry somewhere. It's the,
right. So if this is private property, we just have to get that information, but this is where it is right now. And there are no parking spaces, and the dumpsters, I believe, are in this location.
Ivan, are you doing outdoor dining at this time right now?
And no, we're not, because we were told that as effective November 30th, we couldn't do
Right.
any, so we shut it
Right.
down. We closed it down.
That's right. So I apologize for the delay, and yet it's a technicality that we need to resolve. So we'll look to do that quickly. That date, Lee, that you mentioned for which this would be continued, is that
Yes.
also the night of further deliberations or resolving the decision rather on 1688?
Yes.
yes, but we could do this first, maybe, right? Maybe this is a good question, since we have Natasha here. Do we want to start the meeting at 7 o'clock? Does that work for people? In which case we could do this at 7.
Sure.
I'm fine with that.
Okay,
Yeah.
fine. Then let's just schedule this for first, at the next meeting in first thing, 7 o'clock.
Okay. 7 o'clock. That works for me. Yes, Jean?
At 7 o'clock. Natasha put up a visual. I'm not quite sure what that visual was, but I wonder, as part of our packet, could we have a copy of the original plan that the parking lot plan?
Yes, I think with that, we intended to include that in the package. That was supposed to be in the package. I don't know if there was a mistake. It got omitted, as well as the architectural drawings that you saw tonight, which actually show the photos of the outdoor dining and then the architect's rendering in terms of what was proposed.
Yeah, because there's very little in this packet to go
Right.
to go on. All right, thank you.
I know,
yeah.
I know we have the motion on the floor, Paul, but we're still in discussion, are we not?
Yes, we are.
So my only thing, and this is really more thinking out loud than anything else, is I'm wondering whether, when we see the documents that we're going to see, whether it might require us to revisit the previous petition we just heard from Chris Heap. And therefore maybe have to reopen that one. I don't know. I mean,
Well,
we'll see.
Yeah. If it raises a question, we will speak to Mr. Heap about reopening that hearing if we have to.
Okay.
Before we get to the motion, this is a public hearing, so I do have to give those who are in attendance an opportunity to speak. I am not seeing any hands raised among the attendees. Alex?
I see one.
Oh, yeah, we have one. Artie Crocker. You want to bring Mr. Crocker in? Artie, you seem to be in if you want to unmute yourself and.
Sorry, Paul. Sorry about that, dude. You're not gonna be able to see
Hey,
my.
Artie, welcome. Good to
Thanks,
see you,
man.
my friend.
I'm just gonna turn off video since I don't have the lighting correct. Thanks, Paul. I just wanted to say there's almost nothing been better for the community in some ways during this trying times than this opening up of the outdoor dining. And it's quite obvious how complex it is, as Marty, you were mentioning somewhat earlier, with some of the rules going on. And when we're left at the end of the day, we got the rule of the law and the bylaws are set in place, and what that's going to mean in the future. And I guess we don't really know in totality what it means in the future of what we're doing now, except for what we're doing now. It has a huge benefit for the community. And Ivan does a fabulous job like, of course, the other restaurants in town, but Ivan does a fabulous job with the outdoor dining. So I commend you guys with doing whatever you can to make this happen and stay in place. That's all, man.
Yep.
Well, thanks, dude.
Paul, can I just respond very briefly to Artie? Thank you for that. I just want to make it clear, nothing I raised should reflect at all on what Ivan's doing or his plan. I'm just raising it to try to get the documentation right, and whatever we need to write up next, that be right. That's the whole point of my questioning and nothing else.
Oh, absolutely, Marty. I totally got that. This is really I guess I used the word highly complex. I think you used the word complex because it is, you know, we see what we want to accomplish for the community, but how you write everything into place where something doesn't come back and bite you in the future isn't always obvious of what you have to do. Is we're just all coming together, and I don't know how else to proceed besides how you're proceeding right now. And so, thanks, guys.
Sure.
Thanks, Artie.
And
Thanks.
Okay. Yes, Natasha.
Paul, I just want to tell Ivan, I'm also in support. I just want to make sure that it's written correctly so you don't have to come back here, and so that we look forward for the future. So I highly support the dining.
Yeah. Yes, Ivan. Go right ahead.
No, I just, there's been no doubt in my mind that the town and each one of you has the best interests, and part of this is making sure that we do move forward in a proper manner for current owners of restaurants as well as future ones, because we want to make sure that we're taking the appropriate steps and not give 10 back when the time needs to happen. So I'm totally thankful. I totally understand, and I will see you guys at the next meeting, and we'll move forward then. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Jean, did you have something else? Sure, go
Just
ahead.
quick. I noticed that Mr. Sikolov's email specifically refers to the Hearth application. So I want to make sure that we make his email part of the record. And since the motion that's before us is to continue the hearing, we just remember to reference it at our continued hearing.
Okay. I'm not quite sure that his comments really went to this application. They went more to the town's application because he was concerned about losing spaces. And I think he just made the reference that he recognizes that right now the application is only Hearth Pizza, and so there aren't spaces being lost at the present time, that he recognized that. Okay, before I entertain the motion, any further hands raised?
There is
Yes,
one.
Yes,
There is
Carolyn
one.
Day. You want to bring Ms. Day in? Alex, does Ms. Day have to turn on her own video and unmute herself?
Hi, sorry. How are you guys?
Hi, welcome.
Thank you. I haven't been on any of these formally, but I've been listening for a bit. I just wanted to raise the point just to make sure we're remembering the rat situation that was a few years ago with all the dining outside. So I think everything's been going really well, but I just want to make sure, the Board of Health stays on that and make sure, we're remembering just the rat issue that had happened. So that's all.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, any other? No, from the board, I don't see any other hands raised for participants. So I did hear Adam make the motion to continue the hearing to February 1st at 7 o'clock. I don't recall whether there was a second.
It was.
There was. Okay. Then,
I'll second it again if
okay. Thank you, Marty. Let's take the vote. Mr. Jacobs,
Aye.
Ms. Espada,
Aye.
Mr. Block,
Aye.
Ms. McKnight,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. We have continued the hearing to February 1st at 7 o'clock. And Ivan, we'll see you then. But thank you for coming in. Okay, that concludes our public hearings. The next item on the agenda is a 7:45 appointment. We are well beyond 7:45. With regard to redevelopment at 888 Great Plain Avenue. I have recused myself from this matter, so Adam, I am handing over the gavel to you. And Alex, if you would move me out as being a participant, move me into the attendee section. Adam.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I understand that we're going to bring over Alex, Mr. Junta, who we see. Welcome, George. Good to see you again. Happy New Year. And Jay, we're going to bring over, and I think I see that we have Nick Landry, the architect. If you gentlemen can turn on your videos so we can see you. Very good. Thank you very much. Before I turn this over to you, George, Jay, and Nick, just a couple of comments, if you'll indulge me. I'd like to note for the record that we've received recently 27 emails and letters about this proposal to redevelop 888 Great Plain. We also received a number of emails and letters that I think we had read into the record at a previous meeting, and those letters and emails were from November of last year. I do understand that that some have expressed concern that they were not provided notice of the meeting tonight, and I just want to clarify the process here for those that are watching, as we're not opening this appointment up for public comment. From time to time, a developer will ask for an appointment like this for the board to discuss a concept or a development proposal, whether requiring a zoning change or not. It's common practice here, as it is in other parts, other towns and cities within the Commonwealth. These appointments are designed to provide feedback from the board to the developer that informs the developer's process and certain aspects of their concept or their development proposal. And that these appointments or meetings are not public hearings. They do not require legal notice, and they do not require public comment. When a developer does apply to the planning board for a special permit, a public hearing is required. Public notice of that public hearing is provided, and there is a notice, and members of the to the neighbors and members of the public are given an opportunity to speak at the hearing. The notice provisions for a public hearing that relate specifically to a zoning change are a little bit different than those for a public hearing relating to a special permit application. When the board decides that a zoning change is needed, we provide notice of a public hearing, and members of the public are permitted to speak. But for clarity, we're not there presently. We remain grateful for the public's engagement. Your comments are helpful, and they are considered as part of our decision-making process. So I just wanted to note that for the record. And now I'm happy to turn it over to you, George.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And in fact, you stole several of my opening comments because I have become aware that there's been a lot of chatter in the community. And I think some of that is a misunderstanding. You know, we provided a set of plans for the board to look at to give an idea of something that could be done under what we're proposing. And, as, you know, when we do that, I'm always a little wary because people will sometimes look at those and say, well, this is exactly what's being proposed and this is what the discussion is. And obviously the board knows that those are just sort of an illustrative example of something that might be possible under what we're talking about. And that's exactly what we're doing, is having a discussion about what might happen. And those plans, although we happen to think that they're decent to start with, they are a starting point for discussion and not a final proposal. So with that, if I can, I'd like to share my screen just to kind of refresh the recollection, because it's been a while since we last discussed this property. So let me just pull up a little map here. It's basically kind of what Natasha had up, and the other plan that I had presented. All right, so here we go. So you can see here in the salmon color or pinkish color, right? This is 888 Great Plain Avenue, the property that we are talking about. This is the commercial block that runs along Great Plain Avenue down to Dedham. This is the Christian Science Church. This is the Baptist Church, the YMCA, the field, and the commercial block across the street here. And you can see from this, just sort of looking at it sort of holistically, that this property, which is zoned for single-family residential, is really smack in the middle of a number of non-single-family residential uses. And it is immediately bordered on two sides by commercial activities. On the one side by the commercial block and a little bit of parking in back, and then the commercial parking lot that is partly a private lot for the building at 60 Dedham Avenue, as well as the municipal parking lot here. It also kind of adjoins this parking area, which is used by one or both of the churches. And then obviously directly next door is the Christian Science Church. So, looking at this, you can understand, I think, why we are proposing to change the zoning and do something different with this lot. This lot doesn't really make, to me, to my client, a lot of objective sense to be a single family residential house. It just sort of doesn't visually or otherwise seem to be appropriate there. So we've started off with the request to extend the center business district, which ends here, and extend it over to include this piece because it's immediately adjacent to it. Now, this is an open discussion, so we also recognize that maybe some other zoning relief or other change to the zoning bylaw might be more appropriate or might be a better idea. But this is the whole point of this process, is to have these discussions. Obviously, extending the center business district is sort of the easiest and has some precedent for it in terms of in the overall history of planning and zoning and the way that is done. But we're having this discussion. So at the last hearing, we looked at the proposal, and I'll actually stop sharing my screen now. We looked at the proposed building, and we discussed a couple aspects of it. And one aspect in particular we started to get into, but we didn't have enough time to really flesh out, was our request to get some relief on the side yard setback. And so I provided a supplemental letter that kind of walks through that. And it's not the front yard, it's not the rear yard that are the issues. It is the side yard, and in particular, the side yard that would be adjacent to the Christian Science Church, assuming that there was some extension of the center business district or some other rezoning to put this into some commercial or business zone. And the issue there is the bylaw currently imposes a 50-foot setback for properties adjacent to a residential district boundary. And that obviously is a substantial amount. And while you can use 25 feet for accessory purposes, you cannot have any commercial building, structure, or use in that accessory 25 feet. Even in the center business district overlay, that's the same thing, although the overlay does allow for an extension of underground parking up to 10 feet from the setback, but you still can't use the surface, the 25 foot on the surface for any building structure or so on. So although it's a little better under the overlay, it's still a bit problematic when it comes to redeveloping some of these properties. And, I know, and I think the board knows, this has come up on some occasions with some other properties that were redeveloped that were adjacent to residential properties. It's caused the need for a couple of variances for handicap accessibility, for elevators to allow handicap access to second floors, and a couple of commercial buildings. And it's sort of it's an issue that has been a problem to deal with, in other locations in town as well. While I would love to advocate to change it across the board, tonight, and for the purposes of this property, we're limiting the discussion just to this property and, the possible expansion of the center business district. So really, I guess what we would be proposing, if the board is willing to extend the center business district or make some other zoning change to put this property into a commercial district, would be for some relief relative to the 50-foot setback, and maybe make it by a special permit mechanism limited just to the center business district or the overlay district, so that it's something that would have some tight reins with respect to discretion. It wouldn't be something that could be abused sort of all over town. But so, looking at the lot, and again, it's, where it is, its configuration, it would be difficult to really develop this lot without some relief, at the very least from the 50-foot mark. And part of the problem of that is, if this property is put, whether it be the center business district or other commercial district, right now in the center district, even under the overlay, the first floor of any building can't be used for residential. It has to be used for commercial. So as a result, a first floor of any building would have to be at least 50 foot from the side. And that makes development a bit difficult. In order to get sort of a reasonable number of units, you end up having a cantilever the second floor. And as Adam, you saw the original design, and I think Natasha did as well, it ends to a very, quite frankly, not the most attractive design, not the most interesting building, a very kind of commercial block, Soviet kind of design. And so obviously we don't really like that. We don't think it's appropriate, but that's what the bylaw would kind of force you to do. So we've asked for the relief to try and provide some flexibility. So when it comes time to actually do a good and proper final design to present to the board, that we have some flexibility to be able to do something that works and makes sense, that we're not tied into a ugly design that doesn't really work for anybody.
So, I'm sorry,
So that's it. So as a part of our ongoing discussion, we'd love to hear some feedback and see, what concerns the board has and how we might, help move this forward to get a zoning change so that we can make some reasonable redevelopment of this property.
So I think that's a helpful outline. There's some misconceptions that I've read and that may be affecting some people's understanding of the proposal, which I think is probably worth acknowledging. That although this isn't a residential district, and the structure itself was a house, for the last 40 years or so, it had been operating as a business in what has become, since it's the creation of the building, a non-conforming use. Basically, it's pre-existing. It's a lawful pre-existing non-conforming use. We have a house in a residential district that's been used lawfully as a business, and it's true that there is commercial it's surrounded by commercial activity, and on the including on the north, other than the field, effectively by the Y and by the other businesses along Pickering. It really is a transitional area. I think Lee and Natasha, we talked about the concept of trying to encourage, as elsewhere in the zoning, there is a desire to promote mixed use. There are some challenges to this, though. One is, if I understand correctly, when I took a walk on the weekend, I don't think there's a curb cut between Dedham Avenue and Warren Street. Is that right, on Great Plain?
Well, there is a driveway for this property. But other than, let's see, I'm trying to think. Other than that, there might not be. This might be the only curb cut in the whole block.
So that presents a real challenge, because there are so many families east of here, in the latter districts and the related streets, that are intentionally walking distance to, Greensfield in the center of town. And there are a ton of kids on the weekend and after school that are at like my son, I think we played soccer there, and we've certainly gone there, to play and run around. And I know that other families do too. And having, I think, if I understand correctly, the current proposal, the theory is 24 units of residential and 3 units of commercial. Is that correct?
Right, yes.
So that could be a pretty intense use of vehicles coming in and out of that curb cut, which can be problematic, when you've got businesses, kids are going to be coming in and out of, not kids, adults too, are going to be running in and out of the Needham House of Pizza. Abbott's, I think, is there. And, at minimum, whatever we did allow, if there was a curb cut there, I would certainly want to be clear of our expectations for any audio and visual alarm system for entry and exits, because safety in that section really has to be paramount. And I think that is a legitimate municipal concern. I'm not closed off to it, but I'm not a fan of it. I would strongly prefer and recommend to enter into agreements and whatever may be required. Although I appreciate, Jay, this is not an easy thing, and I certainly don't mean to simplify this, but to have access to it through that municipal lot, through that parking lot south of the lot, that would be the only vehicular access to the building, and that obviously pedestrian access would be in the front of the building. That would do a lot to assuage my concerns about safety. I'm not closed off to it, but I do have some strong concerns. I also, given that this is a transitional zone or transitional geographical area, I don't mind the concept of retail on the first floor and a floor or two of residential. That concept generally I'm fine with. I'm not sure that I'm comfortable with the density with 24 units. And having gone through, the board has gone through recently an application on another project which related to setbacks. And one of the deep dives, one of the lessons we learned from the deep dive in that prior application was a function of setback as between residential and commercial zones. And a lot of towns actually have 100-foot setback between commercial and residential districts. Here it's 50. I think to go from 50 to 10 feet is a high bar to achieve. I'm not comfortable going to that level. That has a critical impact on the width of the building and the number of units and the size of units, Jay, that you're looking to develop. Another question that had come up was a question about the height. And there had been some concerns about 35 feet and 3 stories being out of character with the area. Personally, I don't think that that's the case. When I've walked down Warren Street, there are a number of homes that are at least that height. Some new construction, some even I think a little bit older. So if it were designed to look as if it were a house, I think that might have a little bit of an easier time. If it was effectively smaller, narrower, with access from Dedham Avenue or from Warren Street, that would be the ideal scenario. I'm not convinced. I've had some experience, but I certainly don't have a crystal ball. I'm not convinced that we'd be able to get this through town meeting, whether you as a citizen's petition proposed it, or whether we as the planning board proposed it. I think, Marty, you may have raised a question before about whether this would effectively be spot zoning. And if we extend a zoning district, I don't know that it would be, but there are a number of tests that relate to spot zoning that we have to be very clear about. And just to throw, because it's in football, it's we just passed the wild card weekend. One question I think the board should consider is the extent to which we actually extend some kind of a mixed use scenario all the way, to Warren Street that would cover, the two churches and this property as an effort to promote or achieve some, the mixed use goals that the town has. With that, I open this up for further comment and discussion from any of my colleagues. Jean.
Yes, I think Mr. Junter is before us to get our responses, so I want to be fully there with what my responses are here. First of all, our chairman here for this meeting, Adam, suggested that the prior existing garden center is a lawful pre-existing non-conforming use under state law and under our bylaw. I am not certain of that by any means. My understanding is that that garden center was allowed as an agricultural use, which is a permitted exception in residential districts. And I don't think it has the status of a pre-existing non-conforming use or structure that can be relied on to provide an exception that, well, the old building was 20 feet away, so this one should be, or could be. And then Mr. Junta mentioned that the only relief he'd need would be on the side from the 50-foot setback. But the rear of the property also abuts a residential district. And the plan that was provided, the site plan shows the building to be set back only 20 feet. So I ask, and maybe an immediate response is a good idea on that question. Don't you need, if you're going to build the building you're showing, don't you also need some kind of relief from the 50-foot setback at the rear?
So actually, Jean, let me respond to both of those. I'll do the more recent first. So the short answer is no, because, and let me share my screen again so I can show you. All right, so if you can see here, again, this is us here in the salmon or pinkish color. This is 60 Dedham Avenue. And as you can see, there's this tail piece.
I had missed that.
This is actually part of the 60 Dedham Avenue property, and this is actually included in the Center Business District.
Thank you for that clarification. All right.
So we border the residential along this line, and then this line up to Great Plain Avenue. So yeah, we do sort of from back in here, but not from the back. So it's technically not a rear line that we have the issue, but it is along the back corner here. Yes. Yes, so that's part of too, looking at it in terms of a little digression here with respect to the spot zoning question, because we are bordered by the Center Business District on these two sides, and this essentially squares off the district. That's part of my logic or my rationale why I don't think this would fail for spot zoning. This does not constitute spot zoning, in other words, at least in my opinion. But so I just want to point that out. Now let me stop the share. And you address your first comment.
Mr. Junta, can you put that back on a second? I just have one quick question based on what Jean was saying is, so the three line, thank you. So I'm just gonna annotate really quickly in blue here. So this side, and this side would require the 50-foot setback at this moment.
Yes, correct. That is correct.
But your plan doesn't show that. Your plan shows 10 feet here, 20 and 20.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. And, you know, we haven't really specifically talked about the 20 because if it's reduced down to 10, then obviously 20 is sufficient for that. If that makes sense.
Right, but those three lines, because the other ones about the commercial are the ones
Yeah.
that are the 50 feet.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So now, Gene, to your first point. So actually, based on my research, my understanding is that what happened was this property was initially, like 50 years ago or 75 years ago, it was a single family house. And then at some point over 40 years ago or whenever it was used for Hillcrest Gardens for basically the agricultural activity. And at the time, there was no lot size requirement for that sort of a use. But immediately after they began using this property, the town amended the bylaw to require that you have at least, I think it's 2.5 acres for a nursery or other similar use. So as a result, they were rendered non-conforming, and they were non-conforming ever since. So they started out
as to lot size.
Well, as to use, because the use specifically required a minimum 2.5 acres. So you could only use.
When we, I know we're going in the direction of rezoning. So, and I agree, if we rezone and continue the zone that we have, the underlying zone, center business with the overlay, it's not spot zoning, and we don't even have to consider that issue. But to the extent any relief is asked based on this being a prior non-conforming use or structure, I would want certainly to get an opinion from town council on that issue.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So I want to mention an issue that I have, what I consider a very serious issue with the proposed design. The office building where my practice was in downtown Boston on Arch Street, the back alley, which was also a regular public way with sidewalks, that's where the entrance to the underground garage was. Wasn't a major sidewalk, wasn't, it was right around the corner from Summer Street. But whenever one would come in or out of that parking garage, especially out of that parking garage, yeah, you had lights, you had warnings, but it was very tense as a driver because you knew there could be people walking along that sidewalk. And even though there were flashing lights for the people, there's a feeling of tension and conflict in a situation like that. And especially when you're coming up from a parking garage and you really don't have any visibility at all until you're at the sidewalk. I would rather see in this project a driveway. I realize you have to have access. Take a look at 1517 Oak Street in the Chestnut Street business that was recently built by Tadoli. He's got the driveway on the left, goes to the back, and the entrance is in the back. And if you have to respect the 50-foot setback, you can have your driveway right to the left and come in to the side too. And you could even build your parking garage, for farther beyond the building outline underground because of the permission for parking garages underground. But I would not want to see that entrance to that underground parking garage coming right out to that sidewalk. Mm-hmm. I just feel it would be unsafe and the whole thing should be rethought. And I think we've gotten many comments along those lines from residents and concern about that. The residents are concerned also about any driveway coming out there, but certainly that kind of a underground parking garage entrance, it seems to me, is particularly unsafe. And I note that your dimensional table mentions 35 feet height, but per the special permit overlay, you can go up to 37 feet. And I think you can go to 3 stories. You are proposing 3 stories, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And the third story has to be set back, doesn't it?
I think isn't that the 3+1?
Oh, so it's the fourth story.
I
Like,
think.
Dedham, 50 Dedham Ave has 3 stories of apartments above, right? Your neighbor, 50 Dedham Ave. I think it does. So I wondered if you were considering that as an alternative. For example, if the building had to be made smaller because you weren't going to get that 50-foot setback relief, could you go up as an alternative, as long as you had that setback? What I'm looking for is, I was just out today taking a photo of 50 Dedham Ave.
Gene, what you might,
Yeah,
what you might
it's
not
for-
have seen,
it's 3 full stories and a fourth story setback. So I
Correct.
believe that's what the Center Business District overlay allows. Might that be an option for you?
It very well might. And, you know, and this kind of goes back to my comment about what we've shown you for design is sort of our initial thinking, you know, based on sort of the most basic parts of the Center Business District and the overlay. And I will say, when we did that, I mean, one of the things we were mindful of is we did not want to go too high, because we did recognize that this is somewhat of a transition zone, as the chairman, Mr. Block, pointed out. So we didn't want to go sort of on the higher end. We wanted to try and keep it, you know, sort of more with what sort of standard residential construction is at the 35-foot mark. But, you know, that might be something we have to look at. Once it's tough to answer design questions without having an idea of the full parameter of restrictions that we have to work with. So, you know, it really is tough to directly answer your question. I might throw it to Nick Landry, the architect, who's here tonight, just if he wants to weigh in with a comment on that.
Yeah, I think that, like you said, I think we are trying to keep the building at a lower height, just so there wasn't this large difference between us and the neighboring commercial strip next door. I think that's certainly something we could look at, is adding that floor. As far as the parking entry goes, I think we did talk about coming off the parking lot at one point. I think our lot has that weird little tooth missing in the back on that corner, which makes it kind of hard to get in. But I think that's something that we could look at. I think it would mean that we lose a few parking spots, and I'm not sure. I think that part of the lot is not owned by the city. So I don't know what that means for this discussion. Does that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you. And you mentioned the number of parking spaces. Is the number of parking spaces simply reflective of what our zoning bylaw requires for 24 units and for the commercial spaces? Or are you providing more parking than what is required?
The number of spaces is basically a function of what's the most spaces that we can fit in the underground parking to provide as much parking as we can. The bylaw requires 1.5 spaces per unit. So that would be 36 spaces. So we have, you know, basically we would cover that, but then we don't really have, I think we have one extra space for commercial use. So, you know, we would have to seek a waiver on that point, and which kind of dovetails back in that whatever actual proposal we would bring forward, there might be any number of waivers we may or may not need. And there's, you know, we haven't even gotten to that point yet because, as I said, we don't know the full parameter of restrictions that we will be working with. But yeah, basically we tried to maximize the parking to start with, and then, you know, kind of walk back from there.
Okay. And this is my final comment. As I'm sure you know, the planning board has established a housing plan working group, and we're going to be meeting and having public input sessions over the next year. And we'll be looking at this entire area, Chestnut Street, all the overlay districts in the center business. with a view to, we rezone these areas to encourage multifamily housing, to encourage mixed use housing, which is what you're proposing. And we have had very few proposals. The 5050 Dedham Avenue is the only one that's been built under the overlay. And 1517 Oak Street was built under the underlying zoning. And I think Great Plain Avenue across from the mobile station was built into the underlying zoning as a mixed use residential. So why, I mean, this came in about 15 years ago. Why have we had so few proposals? It's been suggested, especially lately, that, well, retail use is having a hard time. Should we be allowing, and therefore, I'm not saying I'm not saying the people who are talking about retail use are saying this, but it leads me to think in the work of this housing plan study committee, should we be talking about whether we should allow standalone multifamily housing in our downtown in Needham Heights? And what as the attorney for a developer, and maybe Mr. Dorenzo wants to have a comment on this, is it economically feasible to build solely standalone multifamily housing, or does the mixed use actually add economic value to a project like this?
I'll interject real quick, Gene. The last time we spoke, you asked me the same question. You asked me to go back and remember the thought behind it. The way the building stands today, we definitely need the commercial component for the economic ability of the project.
Thank you for reminding me that I asked that question before.
We did, back in November, yes.
And so, in the back of my mind, that's what I thought, did I ask that before? Okay. Okay, those were my questions and comments.
And Gene, and I'll just add to that, from my work in town with other property owners and other developers, there are situations where it might be something that is an attractive thought and somebody might consider it. But one of the big issues that immediately comes up is, can you provide sufficient parking to make it work? And then on top of that, do you have enough of a available footprint to work with that you can fit in your access to the upper floors for residential? Because now you have to have an elevator and sufficient egress, and all the things that go with that. So it doesn't always, I've had a couple of people explore the possibility, and it turned out that it was just too much cost, too much effort. It wasn't likely to net anything in the end, and it might have been a loss. So I think there are I think it's very much a property specific factor. This particular property, because it's a decent size with a roughly rectangular footprint, other than in the back where it's got the angle point and that little tooth that's taken out. This provides some more flexibility, but you look at some of the pieces in the downtown area, and the properties themselves are either not that big, or they're not that wide, or they have configuration issues, or they may be subject to easements with adjacent properties that make it difficult to redevelop. So I think there's a bigger answer to your question, sort of for all the properties that possibly could come into that. And I think that's why you're not seeing a lot of applications, is each property has its own set of issues.
Thank you, George. I very much appreciate your insight from your experience in our town. But that actually, I said I had finished my comments, but actually I hadn't. And I had even written this down, but I forgot to say it. And it has to do with the required parking. I think another thing we should be looking at is whether it makes sense to be requiring 1.5 spaces, parking spaces, for multifamily housing that is transit oriented. And nothing could be more transit oriented than this. This part was less than a quarter of a mile from the center station. So I think that's something we should be thinking about. And I hope it might help with this kind of development.
Natasha?
So I have a couple of questions. One is piggybacking on what Jean said. Can you remind me again how many affordable housing units you're proposing for this development?
Yeah, so again, because this is just more of a concept that we're putting out there, we don't have a set number, but the overlay, I believe, requires 10%. internally we've discussed, and we recognize that there, in order to get the relief we would want from the side yard setback, that maybe that number has to go up to 12% or something like that. Because obviously, if you're giving relief on a particular zoning item, from a planning perspective, there should be justification for that, and sometimes it's a trade-off of if you're getting something that achieves a planning goal, it may make sense to provide relief with respect to a zoning constraint.
Right. So in general, but how many units are you proposing right now?
So it's 24.
So you're talking about 2 to 3 max.
3.
Right.
And then, so that's my first question. My second question is, I have a question about the curb cut that you're mentioning. Did you say you're creating a new curb cut and you're deleting the old curb cut?
Yeah, let me pull up, let me share my screen again and just pull up the,
Thank you, George.
I'm not sure if this will show it exactly, but it might, maybe this one shows it. Yeah. No, neither of them really show it very well. But right now this is basically a garage back here.
Correct.
There's a curb cut, an existing curb cut here and a
Right.
driveway that comes all the way down the side.
Correct.
And under our design, we've shifted the curb cut over to this side, which probably, from a general transportation traffic perspective, given that we've got Pickering here, probably want to shift it away from Pickering rather than having it, right close to that intersection. Even though it's not a four-way intersection, you still probably want to get it further away for better lines of sight and better separation between the streets, or between the street and the curb cut.
And then my third question is the church adjacent to the property seems to be over the property line. Is that an easement?
So, yeah, I'm not sure, that may be, depending upon what you're looking at, that shows that. Let's see, is that?
It's your site plan.
Yeah, so I don't know that you can really rely on that for any real high degree. You're like, this is from the assessor's map and it shows it really close. And I would probably put a decent amount of reliance on this, but not complete, because they're not always the most accurate. And I don't know that the site plan necessarily picked up an actual location in the field. I think they might have just added on as a picture.
This shows that there is some distance here, but the site plan that you have has it a lot closer. It has it. So can I share my screen a second?
Sure. Yeah.
So this site plan has a building basically on top of the property line.
All right, I see. I don't know that.
If I can, I'm sorry. This is Nick Lander, the architect. I think we did get this plan off the internet. It's not an actual survey. I know that the lot width is correct, so that could just be an oversight in where that building is situated. The church building, I think you're right. I think it is supposed to be set over a little bit more.
Yeah, and it looks like it's very close to this building. I guess I'm looking at this with respect to the fact that the building, there's only 10 feet shown here and 20 feet is incredibly close to this building and into the property. So just when you're talking about, the residential setbacks and the implications of it, I think it's pretty important to show, where the adjacent buildings are, because it makes a huge difference, I think. Then yes, so I was looking here that the curb cut was moved over here. I think I have the similar concerns to Gene and I think that Adam mentioned also is the traffic moving in and out straight out of the building. If there was a way of doing something in the rear of the building, and not necessarily creating another curb cut, I think that would be advantageous to this particular site, just because if we're trying to have people walk across, as it is, the small one feels alarming when you're walking by it. So it's just something that to take into consideration.
Doing that could also create a bit more green space around that side of it. If you have the access, if you have the site access, vehicular access coming from the south, you'd then be able to preserve a bit more, create a bit more green space or open space. And in fact, in terms of any residential units that were on the first floor, that also might be attractive from a market point of view. In other words, on a ground floor, ground floor unit that's set far back from the street, that gives you access to the street. It still provides security. The look of the thing might be a bit more palatable.
So, I think I mentioned this at the last discussion that one of the things we looked at early on was trying to do something in the back, because it's sort of a natural thought of there's a parking lot back there, which is a commercial parking lot. Why not pull access off of that? And as I think I mentioned, that tailpiece that I showed when I put up the piece that showed you how the Center Business District, that tailpiece is owned by 60 Dedham Avenue. So we'd have to work an arrangement with them. But that presents an obstacle, presents a challenge, but presumably maybe, a private party, we could come to some terms. But on top of that, then the rest of the parking lot is owned by the town, which means we have to come to terms with the town, and that would then have to go before town meeting, because it would be a grant of an interest in real estate, would require the approval of town meeting. So, we looked at that, and it seemed to us that that was a pretty steep hurdle, because we're now having to essentially get lots and lots of people on board to go down that road. And on top of that, it would require probably some reconfiguration of that parking lot, which would mean all the parties involved in that parking lot, which I believe it's the town, 60 Dedham Avenue, and the two churches, would all have to agree as well. So not to say it's impossible, but it definitely presents a unique level of challenge to try and do something back there.
That's true. And yet you may also have to go to town meeting anyways for a zoning adjustment. If we're going to amend the zoning bylaw, you're going to have to go there anyways. So I think, being upfront about what the purpose of the zoning change is, and also describing how that can create a safer environment, may be a little easier. Marty, do you have any comments or questions?
Well, I do. Let me preface this, George, by saying, come April, I'm not going to be on the board anymore. So whatever you bring to the board, probably, I'm not going to be part of this. But let me just give you some reactions for whatever it's worth here. Much of which, maybe all of which, is repetitive of what other people have said. I too think that having the driveway, a curb cut from Great Plain across the sidewalk down to underground parking could work, but it's problematic. I think it's if you could access your underground parking from the rear, either via directly from one of those parking lots or from a new driveway from Great Plain along the side, not going down. I think either one of those would be better than what we're seeing now. And I get it that trying to get access from the rear is going to implicate a lot of complications for you. There's no question that that's true. I view this site as it's an anomaly to be zoned single residence. I agree, but I also think it is a transitional lot. You say it yourself. It's a transitional lot, and I think it sort of needs to be viewed a little differently than both a residence and the commercial block that's next door. And because of that, I think it needs to be set back from the street line. It shouldn't have a 0 lot line. Not that it has to have a 50-foot setback, but it needs to have something more than 0. And I think there needs to be a lot more greenery. I read a lot of the neighbors' letters. That's important, at least on the Great Plains side. I like the thought process about maybe reducing the parking requirement here from 1.5 per unit to down to 1 per unit. After all, one of the things you're trying to do here is attract a walking crowd, people who can walk to the train station and shouldn't need their cars as much, hopefully. And Jean asked about, what about a standalone multifamily building? Do you really need the commercial or retail space on the ground floor? And Mr. Dorenzo said that he needs the ground floor commercial to make it work economically. I'm not here to contest that, but I do wonder, does he really need all 3 commercial retail or retail spaces on the ground floor to make it work economically? I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen your numbers, and I suspect you're not going to show them to us, but I'm not sure I'm quite willing to accept that it doesn't work economically as a standalone residential building. So those are my comments for what they're worth.
Jean, go ahead.
Marty reminded me of something else. I agree with him very much about the setback, not using the 0 setback, even though that's the standard required setback under this district. And to be able to go back more feet actually requires, as part of, I'm sure you'll be seeking a special permit, with for all kinds of reasons. But the planning board grants a special permit to allow a setback that's farther if the front is going to have a patio or some feature like that. And I think for a couple of reasons. Because of the idea of it being a transition between the church property, which the churches are set back and they have greenery, from that to the commercial block. Also, people are used to there being a beautiful greenery in the front there with, of course, the former use. But more importantly, for safety, as cars are coming out of that driveway, to have the visibility to take that turn, they're taking a left turn particularly. If the building was set back 10 feet or so with some grass strip, something like that, just enough to give you the visibility, to give you something green in front. I don't think it would be disharmonious with the commercial block next to it to have that kind of setback.
One last question that I had is in one of the diagrams that you have that laid out the number of units, there were 3 commercial units on the first floor that totaled, I think, around 8,100 square feet. And then in the back, there were 2 spots, G1, I think, and G2.
Residential.
Just wanted to confirm that. Thanks, Marty. That question was for Marty, by the way. Lee, do you have any comments or questions?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Nick, I'm going to ask you if you have any comments or questions.
No, thank you.
Is there, and then Jay, does this give you a bit more specific direction about what we're thinking? Do you have any comments or questions?
I would like to have another working meeting with members of the planning board. Most definitely. I mean, I think we got to go back to our original design we talked about.
Okay.
That does give a driveway in the side. I mean, getting setback, I think that's easily obtainable. The setback in the front of the building. But yeah, I'd love to have another working meeting with the board.
The board will be open. Will be open to that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And finally, George, do you have any other comments or questions?
No, I think we've covered it on this, but when we're done, I have a comment on your prior hearing. More for Marty's benefit than anything else.
I think we're done, and for Marty's benefit, I'll allow it now.
So Marty, I was involved with, I represented Al Graymont when the parking lot was done back there. And my recollection is with respect to those easements that I don't know if it was Tony Del Gaso, but my recollection is that might have been him that came up with the idea of selling the whole concept to the adjacent property owners by saying, if they granted the town an easement for 100% use and control over the parking that they were giving that the town would be able to use, they would absolve themselves of liability because they didn't have any right to control it or maintain it, and it put it all on the town. And so I know that was a factor in Mr. Graymont's consideration when he swapped off with the town, and if I don't know if you remember, but he swapped off and then he ended up getting a piece of land that he built a building on that became part of the Jacobs block. They also did away with, there used to be a road, and that little piece where you see like there's a little curve behind where Hearth is, that was an actual road that came in and curved through there. If you look on the old assessor's maps, you'll see it. The old plans, you'll see that. So it was part of, the town actually got rid of and abandoned the roadway and extinguished the rights of the property owners in the road. So it was all done, by agreement, and everybody was willing to give up their rights in order to make this larger project work for everybody's benefit. But the easements, from my recollection, is the easement, it was kind of a cross easement that the town got the easement to maintain it and use it, and then the property owners got the right to use certain other spaces, or maybe that was a bit of horse trading depending upon the property owner. I don't know.
You don't happen to have a copy of the document, do you?
Probably buried in a file somewhere because that was back in 2001. So somewhere I've got a hard paper copy, but unfortunately my digital copy got lost when I had a computer meltdown in 2003.
All right.
The documents all went on record, Marty. We have them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're all at the registry.
They're all on record, so we have them.
2001, huh? I thought it would have been older than that. Okay.
Thank you very much, Jay, Nick, and George. We're grateful for you coming in and being open to our comments. We look forward to welcoming you again at another meeting in the near future.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. I think it's time to probably bring our chair back to continue with our main meeting. Should we send him a text? Or Alex, are you able to bring him over? Maybe we'll send him a text.
He's one of the participants. No, he's here.
Oh, look at that. Mr. Chair, the gavel is yours.
You're muted, Paul.
Thank you. It's nice to be back. So where are we? We are at 9:17. I think we're actually going to finish up at a reasonable hour tonight. The next thing on our agenda is minutes. We have minutes of one meeting in our packet from September 21, 2021. It looks like it's already been commented on and redlined by Jean. Do we have any other comments?
There were minutes of November 8th, 2021 also in our packets.
I think that was the executive session meeting.
We've got, it's all about, no, I think those are separate minutes. There are two separate minutes.
The two separate minutes?
One was of the executive session and the other was of the portion of the meeting that was not. Because at the end of the minutes I'm looking at for November 8, 2021, it says the planning board adjourned. Well, wait a minute. Yeah.
I think there were just one.
It said that at the end of the open meeting, the motion was made to go into executive session.
No, I've got them, Jean. I see.
Okay.
No, wait a minute. No, November 8th is just the executive session minutes.
Well, if others haven't had an opportunity to review them, we can wait on approving them. But
The November 8th meeting minutes that were not the executive session, you have all already approved.
Right. This is we have September 21 minutes that have been redlined that are part of our packets.
Right.
Okay. Oh, maybe
That's all.
yeah, I'm sorry. Maybe the other redlined November 8th minutes were emailed separately and were not part of our package.
Correct.
Right. Originally, right. What was?
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes of the September 21, 2021 Needham Planning Board meeting.
Second.
As changed, as redlined and presented.
Yeah, as redlined.
Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. People got moved around, so I'll go in the way I can see people. Ms. Espada,
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs,
Aye.
Mr. Block,
Aye.
Ms. McKnight,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Those minutes have been accepted.
This feels like the Brady Bunch.
Report from Planning Director.
I just want to remind everybody, there are some upcoming meetings. Maybe Jean or Natasha want to speak a little bit more about, we have a meeting of the Housing Working Group scheduled for January 27th, where we're proposing to do a community-wide meeting. It's going to be an educational meeting on demographics and information on the status of housing and affordable housing in Needham. And Jean has agreed to do a historical overview of the zoning history of Needham and how that's, impacted the housing patterns that Needham currently sees. And then an opportunity for people in the community to comment on, give us ideas on what they see as the current problems and what they see as solutions. And we've reached out to town meeting members. We've reached out to members of boards and committees. We've reached out to members of a number of different groups, the League of Women Voters, and there were some other entities I think Jean and Natasha could speak to. So that workshop is planned for the 27th, and I would encourage, I guess, the entire planning board to participate in that. I don't know, Jean and Natasha, if you want to say anything more about that that meeting.
And I'll let Jean talk more about it in general, but I think we would encourage also community members who are here listening to also attend. And it's really a listening session. It's at the beginning of the process. We want to get community input at the beginning of the process. And in general, I think Jean has a lot of really interesting history that I didn't even know about. So I want to hear all about it and just kind of say where we are, just as a kind of the repository of information that we have, and to make sure that everyone has a voice. And Jean, I'm sure that you have more to add.
What I'll add is that the Housing Plan Working Group first focused on the idea of sending out a survey using the town's resources for public participation. And then when we looked at the draft survey, which various members of the Housing Plan Working Group had some input, it just seemed way too complicated and way too early in the process to be sending out a survey like that. We felt that people really would benefit from a public education process first. So that's our focus for this upcoming community session. We are going to have a listening session as well, so that people can respond to what's presented to them right there at the latter half of the meeting. But then that will lead to, there'll be really 3 other opportunities for public participation in the process. One will be a community survey, and there will be a presentation of housing needs, and finally a presentation of the draft housing plan, all for public comment.
Right. Jean and Natasha, I have access to MLS. Do you want any market statistics and data going back 5 or 8 years or 10 years on number of condos, number of single family homes, median price, as a slide that can, show demographic changes in a graph trend? Is that any of that information of interest?
Let me respond by saying that Karen Sunderborg has put together a lot of information along those lines.
Okay.
And what I suggest, and I think would be very helpful, is if you communicate directly with Karen, our community housing specialist, with the data that you could offer,
Okay.
she might very well find it helpful. Do you
Sure.
agree, Lee, that that's the way to go with that?
Yes, I think so. She's basically put together a lot of that demographic data. And certainly I can share with you the data that she has put together so far that forms her portion of the presentation. But certainly if there's information that, that you have that wasn't really part of her presentation that would be helpful, it would be nice to coordinate that. So I can put you in touch with Karen.
Yeah,
And I can also share with you where her presentation and the data that she's collected stands so far.
Okay. If you send me your contact info and what you have, I'd be happy to review it and see what I can add to it to help the process, and to reach out directly to Karen and see if there's anything that I can contribute. Happy to do that.
And have we sent out the flyer and announcement to our planning board members?
The planning board members, I think, should have probably gotten it. It went out, as I understand from Cindy, to all members. Well, it went out to the all town meeting members, which would have been off of Teddy's list.
Yeah.
And it will go out to all board members as well.
Well, just as a quickie, it will be easy enough to send it out and make sure that each of the planning board members has it. And
Sure.
I think you should feel free to forward it to any community organizations that you are involved with. I have a list of those that I've been sending to and that Cindy has sent to, but I don't think there's any exclusivity about it. For example, I've sent to both the Democratic and the Republican town committees, as well as Equal Justice Needham, League of Women Voters, Needham Diversity Initiative, At Your Neighbor's Table, which is a consortium of, I think, religious groups in town that have.
You could also
forums.
post.
We'll be reaching out to the community as much as we can.
You can also post, on the Needham Facebook site, official and unofficial. And when I ran the Heights Association, we also used, I think, Nextdoor, which was, I think, a useful social media platform as well.
And Adam, you reminded me of the Needham Heights Neighborhood Association. That would be an organization to reach out to.
Right. We'll chat. Happy to chat about that offline for sure.
And Cindy is part of our group. So in general, she does the communication for the town. So we're hoping that we can get it out there to as many people as possible. But again, I think it'll be kind of an education piece in the sense of what do we have to date, but it's also half of the meeting is Q&A and comments and questions from the community. And I think that is really valuable to hear this before we begin any of our work and sending out surveys and anything else.
Smart.
Okay, well then the next thing I have is just a reminder to Adam and Paul that our meeting with the finance committee is coming up, so it's on your radar. I thought it was for the 1st of February, but I think I've got the wrong date.
Well, February 1st is our planning board meeting.
Right, I know that. That can't be right.
I've got it on Wednesday, February 2nd.
Okay, then that's the date. Yes,
That's
it's in the evening. I did have a meeting with the finance committee because they're looking at zero-based budgeting last week that I think went pretty well. And so we'll see what they have to say about our draft budget, but I haven't heard anything negative about what we've proposed. So that's scheduled for that Wednesday date. And then lastly, I wanted to talk to you about, I sent an email out today. Alex and I have been working with the Latino restaurant because they're interested in, retaining the outdoor seating that they had installed during COVID. And the issue that they're facing is that seating is actually located on a right-of-way, which services the building that they're in, as well as services the multifamily dwelling that's located next door. And they have been unable to, get a license agreement between the parties to allow them to keep the seating there, a formal license agreement to allow them to keep the seating there, on a more permanent basis. But they have been able to get a letter from the property owner next door, acknowledging the use and supporting the use and indicating that he has no problem with its continuation. And so my question to you is, and I'm hopeful that we can actually make this work because I think it's a good use of the land, of accepting that as opposed to a formalized license agreement and recognizing that to enable this outdoor seating to remain in place after the April 1 deadline when the COVID protections are going to disappear. I can share, if it's helpful for you, I can share my screen and show you where the easement is, but or unless you just understand conceptually what we're talking about.
Well,
show the letter.
I looked at it very briefly. I mean, I didn't get it until you sent it out at like 5:30 tonight, and I got traffic from Boston to home was horrendous. There was an accident on the Mass Pike, so I really didn't have a chance to focus in on this.
Right.
Saying that the COVID allows them to keep doing it until April 1st anyway.
Yes, COVID is basically letting them stay there till April. But all these restaurants, which is the reason you heard Hearth come in tonight, are interested in making these arrangements permanent and allowing themselves to continue them. And so Latina basically is in the same situation. So I can, if you want.
So I'm confused about who actually owns this land and whether it is subject to a special permit at the present time.
Yes. So whoever's sharing their screen could eliminate that. I can show you the easement plan. Okay. So can everybody see that? So essentially, here's basically, can you see my cursor on here?
Yeah.
Okay, so here basically is basically where Latino is located, and this basically is the building that's the commercial space with the residential units above it, and there's basically a right of way that comes in here. And
wait a minute. When you say a right of way, are you saying that is a public road?
No, I'm saying it's a private right of way. I'm saying that this is the property line here.
Okay.
And that this person owns there to that point. The person that owns this building owns this section, and there's a right of way easement that they both have over it that enables them to access the property in the back. In addition to that, the residential building, commercial space, has the driveway that comes in under their building that allows the access to the rear of their property. So the seating has been placed here in this area of this area, and that's where Latina would like to retain the seating. And so we have a letter from the property owner on this side indicating that he's okay with that arrangement, and that they can continue to basically access their dumpsters in the back by coming through this area. And so the question is whether or not, when I initially talked to Gene about this, we thought, well, the way to solve this would be through some kind of formalized license arrangement between the parties, and the Latino would apply. But it seems like it's going to be very difficult to get that done. But we do have this letter from Mr. Fuhrman, I think, who owns this property next door, indicating that he's supportive of the arrangement. It hasn't been a problem. And so the question is the board going to find that to be sufficient to allow Latina to file, to put their seating, to basically formalize the seating that they've placed outside?
Well, can I make a comment on this? Whether that's going to be sufficient to receive a filing, I think we have to recognize that if we accept it and we approve it, it's all subject to Mr. Foreman and Brookline Development Corp. LLC saying, I want it to end. And then it ends.
Right.
There's nothing we can do about that. So functionally, it is a license. This letter, in my mind, pretty much amounts to a license, because a license, as you know, we've talked about this in the past, it's only as good as long as the licensor, the one granting it, wants it to be. Once he says it's over, it's over.
Yeah, he had conditions in that letter. He had conditions on certain existing conditions continuing to exist. Like, for example, he was saying that deliveries to, I guess, his tenants on Great Plain Avenue would continue from Great Plain Avenue without interruption. And I don't know, I don't even know how this board feels about those deliveries on Great Plain Avenue being okay instead of coming in from the rear.
They've been doing that for the last, I think, year or so, Paul.
Yeah.
And that's been actually a benefit to everyone, and is actually when deliveries were coming through the alleyway, it was actually causing damage to the buildings. So this is really, it seems to be a positive solution for both property owners.
But I get to the legal questions, which Marty and I have been, all night, Marty and I have been focusing in on the technicalities of the legal issues. Are there special permits on these two parcels that need to be amended or modified in order to allow this use? And I'm sure that there are. I'm sure that we have a special permit on Latino.
And Latina is the one that would come in front of you. Latina would come in front of you, just like Hearth came in front of you, and they would ask for permission to keep that seating as they currently have it arranged. And they would ask to have their special permit amended to allow this to happen. And their special permit does mandate that the deliveries be off of the, from the back, off of Dedham Avenue. And so we would need to allow them to accept deliveries off of Great Plain Avenue. But that would be part of the application that they would file. What's been the impediment is the issue of where this is located and the agreement between the parties to allow it to go forward. And so now it looks like the abutter has agreed to allow it to go forward. So I'm hopeful that you'd find that letter, I think, as Marty just basically described it, to be the equivalent of a license agreement, and that you would allow us to basically to amend the special permit to enable this to happen. Of course, if at some point in time the parties don't enable it, well, then it goes away.
So let me understand something about, is parcel B 50 Dedham Avenue? Is that the address for Furman's property?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Do we have a special permit on 50 Dedham Avenue that currently requires that deliveries be made off of Dedham Avenue and not off of Great Plain Avenue?
If I could answer that, the driveway that goes under the building, if there were any such requirement upon 50 Dedham Avenue, they could use that driveway under their own building to access the rear. I think it's the deliveries to the restaurant that are more of an issue.
I'm just making the point.
Yeah.
That by allowing this without amending the special permit for 50 Dedham Avenue may cause them to be in technical violation of the special permit. Do they need to come to us with a modification to the 50 Dedham Avenue special permit? I don't know the answer to that. I don't remember what the wording is. You know,
So let's look into that, and in the meantime, answer the question, which I think Marty framed it well. That
well, the answer is yeah, because the answer is very simple. Yeah, they can have our permission, but our permission terminates if they don't have the permission from the licensor.
of course.
And I agree. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Jean.
I think the issue is that, and I'm all in favor of just going ahead with this letter that is evidence that the owner of 50 Devon Avenue has granted at least an oral license to use this to the restaurant. But usually we would want to see the license, and we'd want it to be written, and we'd want to see that there's a notice provision and they have 60 days to cure, or 90 days to terminate, or things like that. And we're just not going to require that in this case. The select, when it comes to the condition that the restaurant have their deliveries from Great Plain Avenue, the select board has been very supportive of outdoor dining. And it's the public way. If the select board doesn't have a problem with deliveries coming in from Great Plain Avenue to the restaurant, I just don't think it's anything we would make an issue of.
I just think in general, we've seen two of these different but similar situations of extensions of outdoor dining. And I'm very supportive of outdoor dining, but I'm not an attorney, unlike some of you. And I think that each one of them has a history that I'm not familiar with. I think that we need town council to look at these to make sure that we're doing it properly. So that would be my recommendation.
That's a good point, Natasha. I'm fully supportive of that.
And they're going to continue to appear because they've been very successful, and it's very exciting for the town, but it's also because things are changing so much. I think they all have like small differences, and we need to be prepared to deal with them independently.
Well, let me respond to that. I think having us vote to seek an opinion of town council would be perceived, I'm afraid, as trying to make things difficult.
I agree with
put that out. Yeah.
I agree with Jean. I think
why would that be? I mean, if we support it, but we want to make sure that all the paperwork is in right order so that everything is approved, why would that be?
Well, I think what Paul said, and that is we would have to recognize that the owner of 50 Dedham Avenue, who has given evidence by this letter that he has granted at least an oral license to use the driveway to the restaurant for the dining, could take that permission away at any time. And as long as we recognize that in the granting of our permit, I don't understand why what would you be asking town council?
So this is temporary, basically. So at any point, it could be taken away from them.
That's the nature of a license.
But I think for that particular restaurant, they've really been relying on this outdoor dining to maintain their business, and that benefit of having that outdoor dining, if we don't grant them permits, is going to disappear for them in April. And I think we want to be supportive of these restaurants and make sure that they continue to function.
Yeah, so actually, maybe I'm beginning to see the light on that. We don't have to go to town council because we can amend their special permit, which basically says, we're giving you permission to do it. We recognize the fact that you also need the permission of
50
Needham Avenue. And, it's just kind of a finding of fact that that their ability to do this, it's a finding that our granting permission doesn't negate their needing the permission of 50 Dedham Avenue to continue this.
Right.
And you know, we're not taking away anything from 50. We're not taking away any rights from 50 Dedham Avenue
But what
Correct.
about your point?
by our granting permission.
But what about your point that doesn't 50 Dedham need to come before us and amend their special permit?
Lee has to look at their special permit to see if there's something there that they have to come to amend.
In the meanwhile, this is less about 50 Dedham, because I think the issue between the parties was the restaurant deliveries
Yes.
were instead of going through the alleyway, we're actually going through the driveway under 50 Dedham Avenue. So by doing this, it effectively cures that problem. And that's why 50 Dedham Avenue is supporting this arrangement, for whatever period of time. Latina understands and accepts that it's, it's revocable at any time, but it's a benefit to the both parties effectively.
Yeah, we just have to word it properly to make it clear that they can't go to 50 Dedham Avenue and say, we've got permission from the planning board, so,
Right.
you can't kick us out.
So going forward,
I don't want to word it in a way that there is any possibility of our causing that kind of a rift between the two of them. I want our language to be clear that, we're not taking any rights away from the owner of 50 Dedham Avenue as to the rights that they have. It sounds like all of the outdoor dining is on the property that is owned by the landlord to Latina.
No, that's not true.
No, it's not. I go by there all the time. It's not true.
No, the outdoor dining is, because what's happening is basically this is like a wall here. And so the
Yeah.
outdoor dining is between this point and that building. And
So it
and
covers the
50
entire
Dedham
right of
owns
way.
this.
Yes.
So it covers the entire right of way, which
That's
means
correct.
that they are putting their seating on 50 Dedham Avenue's property.
Some of
Correct.
it. Some of
So
it.
we do need to amend the special permit for 50 Dedham Avenue to allow this seating to be there.
I think so.
I think if we go down that path, I think this whole thing's gonna fall apart.
Well, you know something, Lee, that's not our problem. We have to adhere to our bylaws and adhere to our rules. And if we have a special permit on 50 Dedham Avenue and it requires our permission to have outdoor seating on 50 Dedham Avenue, then we need to, grant our permission to 50 Dedham Avenue.
Let's go back a bit. When this thing first hit almost 2 years ago, one of the first things we talked about was adopting a policy of non-enforcement when it came to, I think, various possible special permit violations. Do you remember that, Lee?
Yes, and that's how this got implemented, and it was permitted through the town manager's office. These were all reviewed and they were approved, and the fire department, the police department reviewed the drawings along with the building department.
We were trying to make this happen quickly, so that people could do all kinds of, new outdoor dining possibilities. And this was the way we thought of to make that happen. And I'm pretty sure we formally adopted that policy. I think maybe can you maybe try to dig that out, Lee, and we could review the wording of it, because
that policy was only effective during the time of the governor's order, and which is why I'm saying that flexibility is going to all disappear on April the 1st.
Well, why does it need to, though? Why can't we reinstate it even beyond and outside the governor's authority? Why can't we just say for the time being, or some dated period that we state, we adopt a policy of non-enforcement of.
Marty, what we did adopt was a zoning change last October that allowed us to grant permission under that zoning to have outdoor dining in our special permits.
That's right. And that was to replace the emergency provision of non-enforcement.
Policy.
So let's adhere to what we've asked town meeting to approve, and they approved.
Well,
Now we're going to say, well, in spite of going to town meeting and then having them approve this wording, we're just not going to enforce a violation of what we asked town meeting to approve.
well, all right, let's proceed that way. Then the only question to me is this. I think the reason that Lee said this will all fall apart if you require 50 Dedham to come before us is because they're not going to want to spend the time or money to do it, which I totally understand.
Well, let Latina spend the time and money to do it for them.
Or could we raise the issue on our own?
I want to suggest that we take a look at the special permit that was granted to 50 Dedham Avenue. It may be that the owner of 50 Dedham Avenue would be pleased to see an amendment because it may be that the current permit requires that area to be left open for deliveries. So if there's a general deal that, no, they're not going to do deliveries anymore, we don't need to keep that area open for deliveries, that may be actually something that 50 Dedham Avenue is happy with.
And actually, I'm seeing this as a minor modification.
Without a hearing or.
Yeah.
Well, no, I think the issue, Paul, is that oh, you mean for Dedham Avenue, for 50
Yeah.
Dedham?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because all we're doing on 50 Denham Avenue is just allowing them to have outdoor seating tables in an area that they control, in an area that they own.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, we're allowing Latino to put outdoor dining on top of their property.
Or whatever.
Okay.
We're allowing
Which is
50
a-
Denham
which is-
Avenue to allow somebody else to put outdoor seating there.
Well,
Which is-
again, can we raise this on our own and invite Brookline Development to come in to discuss formalizing the arrangement that's been going on for a year or two already?
Well, I think people have been reaching out. You know, I know Marianne Cooley's been involved, and I think Mo has been involved, to try to, and it's been difficult, to get to this point. And that's why I'm trying to find a solution that, is that recognizes, I think, if it's possible, that recognizes that letter and just allows us to deal really with Latina's permit and doesn't pull the other property into a formalized amendment. Because I'm concerned that it's been difficult to get to this point, and it's fragile, and the whole thing could fall apart.
Yeah, that's my understanding also.
It sounds like the relationship of the parties is fragile. And
Well, actually, Adam, now that I'm thinking about it, we've had the owner of 50 Dedham Avenue in front of us before. From what I've seen before, this is not surprising to me from his personality, from his business, that this is not, let's just put it that way.
So having said that, this might be an easiest solution. We have to go through the special permit with Latina. They're looking for outdoor dining. They'll make an application to us. We have evidence of permission granted by 50 Dedham. That's the extent to which they're prepared to do it. It's unusual.
And we're just recognizing that 50 Dedham, the owner of 50 Dedham can pull the plug at any time.
Right. And that's how they're proposing to have us proceed. That's how Latina is proposing to have us proceed.
Well,
Okay, so do we have agreement on that strategy?
It's not clean.
No, it's not clean, but you know, it's a restaurant that really needs this capacity.
If I may be so bold, it's not our job to solve the business problems of the business owners in town. It's our job to enforce the zoning bylaws and to issue permits based upon our zoning bylaws. I know that we're trying to be pro-business. When I first moved to town almost 40 years ago, this town had a reputation of not being pro-business. It had a reputation of being very difficult for business. And I'm very proud of the fact that this planning board and other boards that I've had experience with has that reputation been changed. But, you know, if Latina's got a problem with the owner of 50 Dedham Avenue, it's not our job to solve that problem.
Paul, Mr. Chair, I do think that we are in a kind of a strange situation of the condition of why they need outdoor dining, which is something that is not typical because of the pandemic. So I think that I agree with what you're saying, but at the same time, I think we have to be sensitive to all these businesses really trying to survive through these difficult times. So I just want to be mindful of that as well.
I guess I'm wondering if we don't do something with regard to the 50 Dedham special permit. I don't think we're waiving our right to do something later. I think there's specific language in the special permit that pretty much says as much. So maybe we're not losing much, if anything, by not insisting that they come before us.
Mhm.
Even though it's clearly not the cleanest way to do it.
I'm just pointing out, and you know, and it's Lee's job to read the special permit and see what's there for 50 Dedham Avenue. I'm just pointing out that having these tables and chairs on that right of way that is owned by 50 Dedham Avenue.
Half of it's owned by 50 Dedham.
I'm talking about the portion that is owned by 50 Dedham Avenue.
Okay.
Could very easily, from, you know, the way I know we word our decisions, and probably does, put them in violation of their special permit. That's all. And all I'm suggesting is we do them the favor of cleaning up the language of their special permit. If it's necessary, we have to read the special permit to see if it's necessary. Giving them the authority to allow these tables and chairs to be on their property because we've got the ability to say yay or nay for that, I think. I'm not saying that we do what this is, and I don't remember the wording of the special permit. And I'm just saying, look, Mr. I forget his name, owner of 50 Dedham Avenue. You know, we're trying to do you a favor of not having you in violation of your special permit by your allowing Latina to have these tables and chairs there after April 1st. We just want to clean up your special permit so that you're not in violation.
Well, I can review it and report back to you.
I don't think.
The other part is, can we do so without requiring his presence or even the hearing?
Well, he'd have to submit an application to make a change, you know?
He would have to sign an application.
He'd have to sign an application to amend the special permit to do what Paul says.
Yeah, which could be submitted on his behalf by the owner of Latina. No, he doesn't have to appear. We have a lot of applications where the applicant doesn't appear.
I think we have a unique set of circumstances here. I think you're all correct on the technicality. I think it sounds like we have a path forward here that Lee's going to take a look at Latina's special permit and maybe that of 50 Dedham.
Yeah.
I think that we're going to be sensitive to the needs here. We do recognize already that that Latina has been granted permission to make use of 50 Dedham Avenue's extent of the right of way of their own right of way. That's the critical component. Latina accepts that risk it's irrevocable. It's revocable at any time, and we have to respond in unique times, in unique ways to unique solutions.
Let's go back. Let's go back a step
forward.
Somebody gets mad at the owner of 50 Dedham Avenue. Okay. And they recognize the fact that there are tables and chairs on his property that are in violation of a special permit. They don't come to us. They go to Dave Roach. And they say to Dave Roach, you're supposed to be enforcing you're supposed to be enforcing these bylaw special permits. So why don't you and these tables and chairs are in violation of his special permit. Why don't you force him to remove those tables and chairs? Which of course is to the detriment of Latina, not to him. But this is why I'm saying let's dot our I's and cross our T's.
Well, communication channels are open with the owner of 50 Dedham Avenue. There was a letter that went to select board member Mary Ann Cooley. After Lee reviews the special permit, especially if we perceive that there's a minor change that could be actually to the benefit or if of 50 Dedham Avenue, and we can explain that it would be to his benefit, then perhaps there could be a communication along the lines of, it would be a good idea to, it's no hard work for you. Latina can carry the ball.
Yeah.
But it would be helpful to you to make this change. It depends, because it depends on how it's communicated. That's all.
Okay, well, I think I understand next steps. Thank you for your time.
Yeah. All right. So, Lee, is there anything else?
No, I have nothing else.
Okay.
Lee, in our packets were some very interesting proposed changes to the Wellesley and Westwood zoning bylaws. I don't want to take any more time tonight to talk about that, but I would love to have a presentation on what they're doing in those towns. It sounds interesting.
I was going to bring that up in the next agenda item, which is correspondence, because I was going to say that we have.
Oh, I thought you were beyond that. Well,
although I don't see Westwood. I've got the Wellesley changes. I was just going to mention that we got this notice of zoning public hearing from the Wellesley Planning Board for the various changes. So we're talking about correspondence. we have received from the Wellesley Planning Board a notice of zoning public hearing for their annual town meeting on Monday, January 24th, with some very interesting zoning changes that Wellesley is looking to make, including commercial gun shops, a minor change to their accessory dwelling unit provision, signs, outdoor lighting. I don't recall seeing Westwood in our packets, but maybe.
The Westwood, I think the packet got changed over time, but what I looked at today, it has a zoning bylaw amendment relative to mixed use and multifamily residential overlay district, which is something certainly of interest to us. So it's impossible to just read something like this and understand what they're doing.
Well, we can get the detail of it. We'll get copies of it.
Yeah,
And we can reach out to the planners in both towns.
yeah. When you have the time to do that, I think it would be very helpful to us. Thank you.
And we also have correspondence from Elizabeth Capania, who is a town meeting member from Precinct J, with regard to a discussion that we had with regard to the medical facility, medical clinic that is probably going to be in front of us on an application to amend the special permit for the property on Highland Avenue where Panera Bread is. She expresses some concerns, which are in our packets, and these are all legitimate concerns that if and when there's an application in front of us to amend the special permit, we should look at. Make sure that those issues are addressed. That's what I've got. And if there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to, we have to go into executive session. We need a motion to go into executive session and
Do
to,
it. If I
Adam,
may,
you would please?
I move that the planning board enter into executive session under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A7, for the purpose of complying with Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 22, to review and approve the minutes of the executive session held on November 8, 2021, and that the board not return to open session at the conclusion of the executive session.
Did you do that extemporaneously?
Did it sound okay?
That was beautiful.
I'm learning. I have to say, of all of you, Gene has taught me the most in how to be able to draft motions.
Kidding. Can't believe that.
I'm happy to second
Thank you.
the motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? So for those still attendees, and we do have 9 attendees, once this motion is approved, we will be leaving this Zoom meeting and not returning. So I will now call the roll. Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Ms. Espada?
Aye.
Ms. McKnight?
Aye.
Mr. Block?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. It's unanimous. We are going into executive session. We are leaving this Zoom and logging into our executive session Zoom invitation.